is following a process, because it's the process in my idea is something the way that we know how to do. We start always in the same way, then taking different ways. All of us have a method, even if you don't think about it, but it's quite natural.
Hello everybody, here is Mario. Welcome to a new episode of Design Interview 10 Questions, where we interview designers from all around the world in this moment where we must stay at home, and our goal is to generate and share good content in a way to make people feel the support of the design world. So today we are with Leonardo Sonnoli, an Italian graphic designer. His works are famous and are for big clients such as the Centro Pompidou, the Palazzo Grassi in Venice of the François Pinault collection. He worked also for Triennale in Milano, the Design Week in Milano, GQ magazine, New York Times. So I could go on for one day probably. Of course, he's also he got a lot of rewards for his works, and I think it's not necessary, but he's also an AGI member and a teacher. In the past, he taught in Rhode Island School of Design, TUAV, University of Venice, and today is a teacher at the ISIA in Urbino. So welcome, Leonardo. Happy to have you here.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Mario.
So let's start with the first question, which is, what made you become a designer? There was a story or a designer who inspired you, or?
I don't know. I think it's always boring, the story of everybody, how they become a designer. But by chance, I didn't have a very precise idea what I'd like to do, and I found the only one public school about graphic design in Italy at the time. It was quite difficult to enter, but I was lucky to enter, and so I started with not a precise idea what to do. But I has been lucky to have a few good teachers. I knew interesting person that taught me what graphic design was at the time. I'm speaking about the mid-80s. And more I start to follow an idea of graphic design, very precise. Among the point of references that I had, for sure there was Massimo Vignelli, and so very rigid, strict design. But then I discovered that was really important to the knowledge of the past, and I start to study what's happened in Europe in the 20s and 30s. About all the avant-gardes, and I discovered that was a big treasure to discover and in a way to copy, to have as a reference there. But of course, at the time I had also contemporary designer, not only Vignelli, but for example Paul Ascher, and also the Italian master like Fronzoni and Grignani. And so more and more I discovered what graphic design was, and I start to love books, so I'd like to design books and posters and so on.
You said what design was for you. So today it changed or is still the same? Because I think you started from the beginning of your studies, and as you said, you went further, you developed a lot your style, your ideas until today. So what is design then for you today?
of course, the way how we do it is changed radically, but more or less it's the same. I mean, we have a client, and with the client we have a challenge to design something. The client give us the content, or they ask to add also contents to us, and we develop the design, but more or less is the same. In the past years, in the recent past, many designers started to do different things. For example, being the creator of the contents. Of course, it's possible also to do it, but mainly the role of the designer is to have to be a sort of a translator of the content of a client. There is, of course, there is many different ways to do the graphic design, to have the role of designer. And I think that everybody have to look for his or her role in the design. There is I participated in a book, a very interesting book made by Tony Brook for Unit Editions, that is called the Studio Culture. It is very, very interesting because from this book, it's quite clear that there is no just one way to have an office to do to design something, but there is everybody have a different path, a different way, and so everybody can develop a different way to do the designer.
You, with your studio that you founded in 2017, you design a lot of things, different things, books, you design identities, you design posters, so a lot of different outcomes. But what do you think you create as a designer with these outcomes? Because of course a poster is just a page with a content, but what does really mean what you create?
I don't know. I hope to create something nice to see, at least. I think that the role of the designer is to look for a different way to do the same thing, always, with the knowledge of the past, considering the purpose, the limits, and so on. Always we have to look for a new way to do the same thing, a new way to do a book, a new way to tell something through a poster. I have always in mind a story about Bruno Monari that was asked a company, a textile company, to design new patterns for the textile, for the fabrics. And visiting the factory, Bruno Munari, the first things that he asked was what was wrong to do, what was forbidden to do in designing the pattern for the textile. And so when he discovered it, he followed exactly what was wrong. Because we have always to not to go against but to look for a new way to try to do an attempt to discover a new way to do the same thing.
So we could say that as a designer, you create outcomes that has a different perspective of the meaning, like Munari did.
Yeah, we have always to look at the problem in a different perspective. Yeah, we have to shift our point of view.
And to do this, are you interested in a precise process when you design a new project, or you act free every time?
It depends by the time, the project, and of course my brain is always the same. So usually I'm following more or less the same steps. But I try also in the office with the people working with me also to experiment, to do something different. And in this case, for example, the self-produced things made by just for fun could be very useful to experiment new languages, visual languages, or new techniques, and so on.
And do you think perfection exists in design?
Yes, sometimes. We have a lot of masters in the history of graphic design that did something that is really perfect. But it's something belonging to the masters.
Okay, so you don't think you can achieve perfection, or?
I cannot judge it. It's the other person that judge my work. Usually, I'm very bad to judge my work, and I'm not following the idea of perfection. Maybe I could consider some good work and some other works that I don't like so much. The result I don't like so much, and it depends by many things. Of course, by my skills, but also depend a lot from the counterpart, the clients. It's always a sort of dialogue. And of course, it's my responsibility if the work at the end is very bad done. But it's very important to have a very good counterpart.
But do you think, in case the perfection can be achieved with a good process? So is the process like important for the achievement of a good outcome, or is not related? Because in the previous episodes, we talked with Studio Moot and also with Niklaus Troxler, and they were of different ideas, because Thomas Kronbichler of Studio Moot, he was more like, I think the process is not so important, because what is important is the outcome in the end. And he's more or less the same for Niklaus, but he is more like, if I do a good process and everything what I do is process during the development of a project, then I can achieve a good result.
All of us is following a process, because it's the process in my idea is something the way that we know how to do. We start always in the same way, then taking different ways, but all of us have a method, even if you don't think about it, but it's quite natural. We do everything in the same way, with the same method. Then we can add new ingredients in our recipe. But even if we don't know, we don't think about it, we have a process, a method. And it doesn't exist one right process, one right method, is what I say before. All of us have a different approach. I know really good designer that I'm very jealous of their skills, but they have a completely different approach than mine. It doesn't exist just one right way. In my case, I need to know very well the story of what I'm of the content. I know that for a designer, a good tool is the knowledge of the past and so on. But it's my approach, something that I learn from other people. There is some designer that I know that is completely free, that have very free approach, but it's a method as well. Niklaus, it's an example. Niklaus produce always different things, different posters, but the process is very, very similar.
When I introduced you, I mentioned that you teach in US, but you also teach in Venice, and you are teaching in Urbino, Artissima. So I think education is really important for you. What do you think about the design education?
A difficult question, because I think that it's one of the most important thing in a country to have a good level of education in the design. For sure, if in Italy, in the past years, after the 80s, and so far, we don't have a very high level of the design as we had before. Probably one of the reasons is also that we missed the education in the design, the school of designs. But it's not enough to create schools. The school is composed by, it's very important, of course, the teacher. And mainly the teacher in a school of design are designers. And here, if we speak about Italy, for example, the main problem is that there is very few money to pay the teachers in the schools of design, usually, especially in the university, in the public school. And it means that for the public school in Italy, it's not possible to invest a lot of money to have a good teachers. And also, it's very difficult to invest on the teachers to have a full-time position of teachers. As in abroad, we know that exists. It's a very complicated question. I don't have of course, an answer about education. I'm very happy that I had an experience abroad at the RISD. That is very, very good school. I have now an experience because I run since 11 years a summer school in Italy together with Verplatz Typography, the Dutch school, and also there we use a completely different method than the method that I use normally at the in Urbino. In the many years that I started to teach more or less 20 years ago, 17 years ago, I didn't know how to do it, how to teach. And I don't know if I'm a good teacher, of course, but every year I'm thinking if I'm doing the right thing. And every year I try to change a little about my method, but it's not easy.
Once a teacher told me that it's really nice to teach because somehow you're always like exploring, experimenting, because you're following also the students. You're not just the teacher, but also you see what they are doing, the new trends. So it's always like keep you update somehow. And do you like it?
When I am able to teach in a way that I'm thinking it's right, I'm very satisfied. But the problem is that working at the studio and teaching sometimes is not easy. So I think that it's correct to teach if we have enough time to think about how to teach. For sure, the relationship with the students is very, very interesting. It's very helpful also for me as professional.
You said that during the years, the education in design, I mean how students were good when they were going out of the school is changed. Now they are probably less good than before. So maybe also internet had this impact. So internet changed this. Do you think maybe the impact of internet make it worse?
The internet, the access to the net, it's really, really helpful for a person already educated. It's an incredible tool. Probably for a young student, not educated, it's very, very dangerous because we don't have now the filter of the critic. There is nobody that have the role of the critic, but not only in graphic design, of course, in literature, in music. Before the internet, we had some point of reference, like magazines, books, historian, critics, people that was professional critics about different disciplines. Now we don't have it. We have some blog. We buy often just reading how many stars on Amazon have a CD and so on. And we have no time to read the critics about what's happened, and especially the young students look at many pictures, just the surface of the design, but they are not going through, they are not going into the reason why something is designed in some way. And so we have a very incredible tool, fantastic tool, but that sometimes could be dangerous also, because the formalist approach happen really often with my students. I see that they just copy the form of something without the knowledge of why something has been designed in this way.
Before you said the role of the designer changed during the years. Before, the designer was more a translator of a concept, and today designers are also creator of the content. So what kind of role the designer will have in the future for you?
No,
Is going to grow, or?
No, I told you that someone consider the role of designer also as creator of contents. Sometimes it is possible, but I think that we have to know our profession, the history of graphic design, so we can create contents about graphic design, but not about other things. I don't believe that the role of the designer is to do exhibitions or books about politics or social problem. Our role is another one. Of course, there are few designers that during the year they develop more interest in other fields, but it's not the rules. There is a lot of example of great designer nowadays that are doing the designer exactly in the same way than 50 years ago, having a client and discussing with the client, and they are producing incredible things, very, very interesting, very high level design. It's nothing bad to do graphic design. It seems for many designers, it seems also for the students, seems that doing the graphic designer in a normal way seems something bad, something not too cool. So why not? So it's important to do something that you are able to do very well.
Of course, in this moment, we are facing this global pandemic which is really bad. As you said, you also are in a red zone at the moment, so you cannot even go to your studio. But do you think, as designers, in your case, graphic designer, can we do something for the world in this moment, also in a small way, or is the role of someone else? Of course, we cannot do medical stuff, but can we participate in this moment?
The most useful things that we can do is stay at home and washing our hands. That's all. We could be useful if, for example, who is organizing the hospital or this emergency zones need to communicate in a very simple way, effective way, the rules. So they could ask a graphic designer to design pictograms and so on, so the posters to explain something to the people. But the communication and so the facts that happen everything so fast that probably the communication tool are other, not visual. For example, there is the police going around the city with the microphone saying the people stay at home, stay at home. That is not it's more effective than visual design because we have no more roles. Usually I don't agree, and I usually quite hate contest of poster on the web to design something against coronavirus because it's completely useless. To design a poster it means that we have to do something useful. So no, unfortunately, I don't think that the graphic designer is very useful now.
We ended with the last question, Leonardo. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you for inviting me to this interview.